Common sense, best learned and understood. When I was growing up, my mom and my dad taught me common sense and taught me that actions and stuff has many strong consequences dialed into them. And these lessons were given and so forth. But these days, people don't have common sense or concept, which their actions would dictate that sooner or later whatever they're doing will catch up with them and it will bite them in the butt, which is really sad, because then it's considered that when they do something and they know they're not supposed to do it, they do it anyway. And this happens more than oftentimes when I'm working, or vice versa, because people do stuff and then they don't realize that sometimes it's not a good idea, and then they end up continuously doing it without realizing the consequences or the unforeseen circumstances that happens to somebody else, which is which would also be considered throwing somebody else under the bus or under the train, because then somebody else ends up having to deal with that, which those people who have not been taught common sense or concept, or vice versa. And that's where that comes from, because then it defeats the purpose of those factors and why certain things are created. Because sometimes people do stuff because they're either really dumb or really stupid, or they had not learned the lessons when they were growing up, which made them really a bunch of dumb or stupid nutcakes or a-holes, which, excuse my words, when not being paid attention to or not acknowledged, because they think that, well, it's perfectly fine to be disruptive and interrupting people and doing all that stuff, which in many cases this is based on people just not willing to sit down and learn, or willing to get out a piece of paper and start writing stuff down, let alone trying to figure it out. And it takes a long time to get things mastered and learned or created, and some sort of sense of structure being formed throughout any type of reality. But sometimes it's a question or the degree that is considered that we don't get until we're completely fully grown or not. Because sometimes, in some cases, even kids have far better sense than many adults have. And also being entitled is also considered being a spoiled brat, or somebody that has no principles whatsoever, and that they try to ramrod the situation or try to make the situation whatever it is. And that's real sad too, because they have just decided that they're not being able to adjust to the reality or so forth, which goes back to common sense and concept in my book. And there's a whole lot of science behind it, but it also goes right back to the parents and the mom and the dad that hasn't taught people that not to do certain things. Thieves have an even worse time because they are busy sticking their noses into stuff that does not concern them. Like doing things that they really are not supposed to be doing to even begin with. And that's happened one time where I work when somebody got into the ICC and receiving clerks stuff, and a bunch of nosy, pesky thieves, or a nosy, pesky thief got into the store and then stole the ICC clerk's keys and stole some other stuff out of the office that did not concern them. Thieves are no more than people that are just plain nosy, unprincipled so-and-sos that didn't learn anything to mind their own business in any case, because they hadn't learned to keep their nose out of other people's affairs, and they are also considered nosy busybodies that just, to begin with, it whatever it is that was inside that office didn't concern them. And that's what is really not so surprising, because when you deal with people that don't have any common sense or concept, not to go into a back room and not to go into an office and start snooping around or sniffing around looking for something, then it is quite clear, because you just don't do that stuff and think that you can just get away with it. Because in my world, if you do that, you could go to jail or you could go to prison for doing something like that, or even worse, because it's just not heard of in my type of world to go nosing around or pecking around or looking for something that does not concern you. And that's what it is. The same thing with telemarketers and the same thing with other people that are nosing around. That's because it's just not heard of in my type of world. And I carry a lot of common sense that actions have consequences dialed to them. Actions, if they're negative actions, you're going to have unforeseen consequences dialed into it, and that's all there is to it. Good actions, you get good results. But on the other end, if you do contrary, you're going to have problems, no matter which side it is, because then the person that is doing it will one day be doing that, and then it's going to come back full circle, and it's going to bite them in the rumpty dumpty or butt, because they know that it is not considered. That happened on the 17th, because actions have unforeseen consequences. When you deviate from a schedule or you do something you know you're not supposed to, it's not on the schedule, then that's called not being well scheduled, or it is calling up somebody without considering the fact and throwing them under the bus or throwing them under the train because there's no other choice in the matter. And it can be a real challenge. And it is just one of those things, because it's like going up to the teacher and then disrupting the class 2 or 3 times. When the teacher asks you not to disrupt the class 2 or 3 times, and you do it anyway, that's another one that is not paying attention to common sense or concept in my book concerning this matter. And this is according to CRIS Brown, concerning common sense, which is much more greater than most of it, even within the science of why people do stuff and how come people do stuff. But there's a question and a degree concerning that, which our world sometimes has never mastered and has never learned anything about this, because in their upbringing it's considered that factor. But interrupting somebody and bothering somebody, that's a very, very serious matter, because it is asking somebody to cut corners. Cutting corners is known fact, because they think, well, he'll get it the next time or something or other. But really, generally, it's not he will get it next time. It is disrupting the class 2 or 3 times, and so that people could fail the lesson or fail the test. And that's pretty bad, because then it comes back to who's going to be dealing with the consequences. Who is going to be dealing with the consequences if you send a situation out and then you find out that the person is undertrained or not trained at all or cross-trained at all? And that's common sense too, which is common sense 101. That if you do not have common sense intact or any type of quality, it's going to completely become a problem. So I've learned a great deal about the use of common sense, and to make sure that people are not just slipping by this lesson and so forth, which I'm beyond grateful that my parents taught me good manners and good, strong structure, no matter what it is, and no matter how much I have lived life, and I am beyond grateful that I have learned these lessons, even within my work and within everything that I do. No matter which departments I've trained in, and no matter all of it. And to have a strong function throughout this reality per se.